Well, hello there and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Monday, September 30th, 2024, the 40th Monday of the year, the final day of the month, and International Podcast Day. Who even knew that existed? Created in 2014 by a podcaster named Steve Lee, not to be confused with the great Stan Lee, but who started podcasting as a way to keep his family informed. And yes, I'm a little under the weather, but I'm celebrating Podcast Day by informing you on the Newsmax Daily podcast. As of this morning, at least 91 people have been killed in connection with Hurricane Helene's weekend trail of destruction through the Southeast, extending as far north as Virginia. 30 of those deaths were in the mountain town of Asheville, North Carolina, where many roads and communications have been wiped out. The town is literally decimated. 25 people killed in South Carolina, the rest in Georgia and Florida, where Helene initially made landfall, you remember, back on Thursday night. Supplies and help are desperately needed in all of those areas.
We're giving them all everything that we have. We're on the ground ahead of time, so we're working hard.
President Biden in Delaware yesterday promising the full support of the federal government and saying he will visit some of the most impacted areas this week as long as it doesn't interfere with emergency response. Both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Harris on the campaign trail this weekend said they would make trips to areas devastated by Hurricane Helene as well. Trump opened up his rally in Erie, Pennsylvania yesterday with this, and you may have seen it on Newsmax.
We were in Wisconsin yesterday, and except for the fact that the administration would not let us have we had 50,000, maybe more people, and we were going to do an outdoor rally, and we ended up having to do it inside in front of about 1,000 people. But we had 50,000 people that showed up, but they didn't want me to be outside. They said they couldn't get us enough people because they were guarding the United Nations and Iran. The president of Iran is here. But Iran is threatening my life, and they're guarding the president of Iran. And Biden doesn't say anything. I'd say something. If that were me, and I don't care who the opponent was, I'd be letting him know, you better not touch, you better not do anything. But, you know, they're guarding Iran, and we had 50,000 people. It was the most incredible scene. Wisconsin, I think we're going to do great in Wisconsin. But
if you've been paying attention, you know that is exactly what I said in Friday's Newsmax Daily. And after all of last week's hubbub about the Commerce Secretary saying Trump needs to be extinguished or should be extinguished, the mainstream media today making a big deal about this comment from Trump.
she's sick and she's a liar. And the reason I keep mentioning McDonald's, because it was so basic. She worked at McDonald's. And it was a lie. She's a liar.
Donald Trump calling the vice president sick. He's the one responsible for all the rhetoric, for ramping things up. You'll hear a lot about that today and some other comments that Trump made that all stemmed from him talking about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's open border.
On day one of my new administration, the invasion ends and the deportations begin. We get them out. Thank you very much. As soon as I take office, I will stop all migrant flights to Pennsylvania and every other state. I will shut down all entries through Kamala's migrant phone app. If you can believe, they have an app. They have a phone app called an app. Can you believe this? I will end immediately catch and release. So I had catch and release too. But you know where I released them? In Mexico. I have catch and release too, but I released them in Mexico. Their catch and release was to catch them, even if they were a criminal. Immediately, they released them into our country. I released them into Mexico. I will end all sanctuary cities all over our country immediately.
Meanwhile, the vice president held a rally in Vegas last night after two fundraisers in California earlier in the day.
We also tonight have here some of the Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, another organization that moved the hell out of her state. She has to know. They're from Oakland, right? In Las Vegas and at the Arizona-Mexico border on Friday, Harris delivered the same line that she's used at every event.
Earlier this year, we had a chance to pass the toughest bipartisan border security bill in decades, and Donald Trump tanked the bill because he thought that bill, if passed, would have hurt him, and he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
She also posted multiple tweets about how she's going to fix the border. This is must-hear commentary from Newsmax host Joe Pinion.
Why would we believe that Vice President Harris is in favor of building a wall when she spent 2 years calling Trump's border wall a vanity project? Why would we believe Vice President Kamala Harris is earnest when she claims to be in favor of building a border when she was in full support of this current administration selling all of the leftover metal from Trump's border wall construction to ensure the next administration could not finish it? And yes, spoiler alert, Vice President Kamala Harris is running to be the next administration. When the state of Arizona used shipping containers to stem the surge of illegal immigration through hotspots on their southern border, the Department of Justice sued them, and Kamala Harris supported them. When the state of Texas put buoys in the Rio Grande to help stop illegal crossings, in an effort to deter desperate people from drowning in pursuit of their American dream, the DOJ, it sued the state of Texas as well. And Vice President Kamala Harris supported them. And so here's the truth. As painful as it is for some Republicans to acknowledge, Kamala Harris may, in fact, go into the history books, for better and for worse, as the most consequential VP of our lifetime, if for no other reason because she has cast more tie-breaking votes than anybody else to hold the job in modern history, which is exactly why the facts matter. She was a vigorous advocate for the end of Title 42. She was a staunch supporter of ending Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. This is the record. Those are the facts. And the passion of an election year and the perspective of our politics does not change the reality of these unshakable, undeniable border outcomes. The promise by the Biden-Harris administration to end 4 years of Trump's border policies led directly to 2 million gotaways crossing our border and entering the country illegally, and close to 300 apprehensions of individuals on the terrorist watch list, after we witnessed just 12 under President Trump over a span of 4 years. Nearly 6 years after we witnessed what we have dubbed here the weeping of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at a migrant detention center at the site of children in cages during the Trump administration, there are reportedly nearly 320,000 missing children that have been processed and misplaced by our nation's government on this current administration's watch. And if that wasn't bad enough, we already know that according to groups like Amnesty International, no less than 60%, if not more, of all the women and children that come to this country across our border are sexually assaulted. The 7 pounds of flesh required for them to begin their journey on our soil. And so surges to the border, it's not just a financial crisis for America or a security risk for the homeland. It is a moral and humanitarian nightmare where the inaction of our country's leaders has made every single American complicit in child sex trafficking. New York City currently is staring down a $5 billion hole in the budget as a direct result of a migrant crisis that the Biden-Harris administration told Americans was a Republican talking point. Springfield, Ohio, and towns like it all across this nation lack the resources they need to assist individuals who are in this country because the Biden-Harris administration effectively told them to come. And so, yes, we should all be grateful that Vice President Harris is headed to the border a mere 38 days before Election Day. I am encouraged that she has grown tired of people playing political games with the southern border. But don't point to Trump encouraging Republicans to vote against a bill with a poison pill that would have allowed millions of undocumented migrants to continue entering our country and call it politics. If you're going to continue to insist on ignoring the fact that in May of 2023, nearly a year before that intervention, 219 Republicans in the House of Representatives voted for one of the most stringent border bills in modern memory. And every single solitary Democrat in the House voted against it for politics. And what happened? There was silence, only to watch Chuck Schumer allow the bill to collect dust in the cellar of the Senate. And again, there was silence, only to have Biden say he would not sign the bill if it showed up on his desk. And then we watched collectively as the head was nodded. So no, America cannot be unburdened by the past if we refuse to tell the truth about the present.
Terrific commentary from Joe Pinion, as always. And this goes back to Democrats being much better at politics than most Republicans are. Not a day goes by now that you don't hear the vice president or some Democratic lawmakers somewhere talk about Republicans not approving the border bill because of Donald Trump, which is not true. But when is the last time you heard what Joe Pinion just said? Or have you ever even heard it? Did you even know that almost a year before the border bill in question, every single Democrat voted against a Republican-led bill on the border that, by the way, didn't allow for up to 5,000 illegals a day to enter the country? This is Arizona Senate nominee Kari Lake on Newsmax with Greg Kelly.
Your reaction, and good to see you tonight.
Ooh, my blood's boiling right now. When you gave those numbers, I heard those numbers earlier. You know, it's 425,000 convicted criminals, 14,000 murderers, 16,000 rapists. And those are the government numbers, so you know they're even higher than that. I'm surprised she didn't call Joe Biden and say, "We did it, Joe, we did it. We destroyed this country," because that's exactly what she has done. As she stands here by the border, there are people all over this country probably ready to throw something at their TV. Everybody who's lost a loved one from fentanyl poisoning, everybody who's lost a loved one to crime that a migrant, an illegal immigrant, committed on them, every city that's turned into a sanctuary city, every state that's turned into a sanctuary state. That woman right there on your screen, walking along the border, trying to do a photo op, is responsible for. She's the border czar. We can't forget that, even though she's trying to bury that. And for her to come down to the border right before the election, try to act like she gives a damn. And pardon my anger on this, Greg, but we are feeling the effects of this terrible border policy that she caused right there here in Arizona. And I've talked to so many moms and dads who've lost a 16-year-old son or a 19-year-old daughter. And for her to stand there and act like she cares about our border, it's shameful. And you're right, it's an impeachable offense. It's treasonous what they've done here on our border. We don't have a border anymore. It's just a cartel zone.
You know, if we could re-rack that video, I saw something kind of interesting when she was walking along. She was totally despondent, looking at the ground. Take it full if you don't mind. No. At the beginning portion of this thing, yeah, she's just kind of head down like a bored kid on a tour of a museum that she doesn't want to be attending. She's not even looking at the guy. I know later she's going to make eye contact, but that kind of reflects her general attitude. I don't think she likes being there. Her base doesn't want her there. The base wants it wide open. Joe Biden's promised to urged people to surge the border. Remember that one?
Right. Well, she doesn't want to look up and look at the border wall because she wants that border wall gone. You know, remember, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we had $325 million worth of materials to finish, or at least partially finish, that border wall, and they gave it away for pennies on the dollar. So she's probably standing next to the border wall in her head, wondering how quickly she can get rid of the wall that is there so that there's more space for people to pour in illegally. It's really despicable what they have done. I'm surprised she could even find the border today because she hasn't been able to find it for, 3.5 years. And to come to Arizona, she's been to Arizona, by the way, probably a dozen times, and she's never bothered to go to the border, even though this is the state with more fentanyl pouring in than any other state. This is the state where we've watched as thousands of military-aged Chinese men have poured across in the open gaps, where we've watched children being trafficked. And that woman right there, Kamala Harris, has lost track of 320,000 little ones, babies, children who've been trafficked across the border who are missing now. And that is really, truly blood on her hands.
Kari Lake on Newsmax. Donald Trump also mentioned the 350,000 or so missing children, right? I mean, that alone. This is Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn on America Right Now with Tom Basili.
An alarming new report out of Immigration and Customs Enforcement has now confirmed that the U.S. under the Biden-Harris administration has let in now over 600,000 illegals that are previously convicted criminals or have criminal activity, found guilty of crimes including rape and murder. Here is the vice president who finally visited the border yesterday. Watch.
There are consequential issues at stake in this election, and one is the security of our border. The United States is a sovereign nation, and I believe we have a duty to set rules at our border and to enforce them. And I take that responsibility very seriously.
Does she, Senator?
Obviously not. If she did, she would be doing something about that border right now. And it would be laughable if it were not so sad and dangerous that this vice president, who has lied to the American people and for years has looked at the camera and said, our border is secure, and she knows it's not. And now these reports, 650,000 illegal criminal aliens in this country. Countries have emptied their jails. This administration's had to admit it. We know also that they have more than 350 known terrorists that have come into this country. What do they think these people are planning to do? You also know there are tens of thousands of Chinese nationals. They've come in the country illegally. And this administration, in order to beef up population numbers in these big blue cities and states that people are fleeing, they have that border wide open. And it is insulting to the American people that she would finally go to the border and blame everybody else but herself. It is insulting.
Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn, who campaigned with Donald Trump on Friday in Michigan, if you saw that, on Newsmax. And Trump campaign National Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke with our Rita Cosby on Saturday Report.
It was astounding last night because there was Vice President Kamala Harris at the border, and it came as ICE had just released some really stunning data of the number of illegal migrants with convictions for criminal charges in this country. And some of the numbers were astounding. I mean, I was looking at this here. These are convicted of homicide, 13,000, 15,000 killers. I mean, are you kidding me? All in all, it's hundreds of thousands with convictions that have entered this country. And as you see here, are at large. This is stunning. And then we see, Caroline, it was like hours later, there's Kamala Harris trying to act tough on the border and not saying a thing about this report and acting like she has done something. Where has she been the last 3.5 years?
Exactly right. And I wish the establishment media would ask Kamala Harris that question. Kamala Harris is a fake, phony politician. And for her to go down to the border yesterday with a straight face and lie to the faces of our brave Border Patrol and lie to the American people, claiming that she's tough on border security, absolutely not. Look at her actions throughout her entire career as a senator, as attorney general, even district attorney, way back in her early days in California. She has consistently stood against deportation. She led the fight in the Senate in 2018 against funding for Border Patrol and ICE. She voted voted against the construction of President Trump's border wall. She called it evil and racist. And she and Joe Biden opened our border to the entire world on day one of their administration. And we've had an invasion of more than 20 million illegal people. And this new ICE data is completely disqualifying. It proves President Trump has been right. The entire world is taking advantage of our open border, sending their worst, emptying their prisons and their jails, sending convicted murderers and rapists to commit harm on American citizens here. And Kamala Harris hasn't done anything about it. Yesterday, our team spoke with 3 angel mothers, two of whom lost their daughters at the hands of illegal murderer monsters who raped and killed their beautiful daughters. Another mother whose son was killed at the hands of Chinese fentanyl that came through the southern border under Kamala Harris's watch. Kamala has never reached out to those families. She's never even uttered the names of those victims. It's disgraceful. For this border crisis alone, she should resign, never mind be considered for a promotion to be president of the United States. She has sold out our sovereignty. That's the number one responsibility of a commander-in-chief, and she has failed.
Caroline Levitt on Saturday Report. There isn't one thing she said there that isn't fact. And it really makes you wonder how this race is even a race. Another big issue, and what should be another big problem for Kamala Harris, is the Israel-Hamas war. Israel over the weekend saying it took out another top terrorist commander.
I want to make sure we get your thoughts on this huge news today that just came in a few hours ago about Hassan Nasrallah. Israel has literally been going it alone in their fights with Hamas and Hezbollah, also the Houthis. Let's not forget about them, because the White House hasn't really helped at all in terms of Middle East policy here and also helping Israel. They've been flipping and flopping. Your reaction to this stunning news that Hassan Nasrallah, probably one of the biggest terrorist leaders in the world, has now been killed?
Well, the reason we're in this war in the first place is because of the White House's policies. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris reversed all of President Trump's very effective and tough sanctions on the Iranian terrorist regime. They were weak. They were broke. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden lifted those sanctions. And now, since they have come into office, they have profited more than $80 billion in oil sales. Just weeks before the October 7th attack on Israel, Joe Biden transferred $6 billion to the Iranian terrorist regime, which likely was used in the attack on October 7th. And the proxies, the terrorist proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, have been able to get away with their terror reign and killing innocent Israelis, holding even American citizens hostage. None of this would have happened if President Trump were still in the White House. And the fact that this conflict is still ongoing, of course, today is welcome news, but we're still very much in the thick of it. And it just proves how desperately we need to re-elect President Trump. Imagine 4 years of Kamala Harris as the commander-in-chief. The world is laughing at her. She has caved to the far-left pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers in this country. She has been flip-flopping on her support for Israel the past 4 years and throughout her entire career. We need President Trump again, who will stand strongly with Israel and send a very clear message to the Iranians that their bloodthirsty terrorists will be shot down. And by the way, the Iranians know that too, and that's why they're in an ongoing plot to try to take out President Trump. They're not doing that to Kamala Harris. They're doing it to President Trump because he is the greatest threat to their terrorist regime.
Yeah, how big of a concern is this? Obviously, also for President Trump. You bring up a great point because, boy, we have seen that Pakistani guy who was arrested tied to Iran, and that was a day before the Butler rally. And you know what I keep wondering, Caroline, like, where is the current president of the United States and the vice president? They should be pounding their fist and saying, don't you dare ever consider touching the hair of a former president of the United States. As a Trump campaign, as you're sitting there watching this, are you astounded that they haven't done that?
Astounded and disgusted. The fact that the sitting president and vice president have yet to break their silence on the fact that our greatest adversary in this world, Iran, is engaged in an ongoing plot to take out the former president of the United States, and Kamala Harris nor Joe Biden have spoken on it. As President Trump said in his speech this past week, if Iran was threatening a former president when he was president, he would blow that country to smithereens. It doesn't matter matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you do not threaten American citizens, American politicians, and leaders of our great country. And the fact that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have yet to say anything on it proves that they are unfit to serve as the leader of the free world. They don't know how to provide peace through strength like President Trump did. They appease our adversaries with weak rhetoric and weak policy.
Again, that's Trump campaign National Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Saturday Report with Rita Cosby, part of the fantastic weekend lineup on Newsmax. That's 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturdays. The other big news from the weekend comes from the entertainment world, the passing of singer, songwriter, and actor Kris Kristofferson, who's a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. Aside from his own hits, he wrote Janis Joplin's chart-topping Me and Bobby McGee. He wrote songs for Johnny Cash, including Sunday Morning Coming Down, which also went to number 1. Starred in the original A Star Is Born, as well as many other movies, including my favorite, Convoy. He's also an Army veteran, Kris Kristofferson, 88 years old. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell speaking at an economic forum in Nashville, Tennessee today. And topping the business headlines, AT&T is selling its stake in DirecTV for $7.5 billion. $7.5 billion. On Wall Street, stock markets opened slightly lower. The Dow was off about 70 points at the open. AT&T stock was up about 12 cents on the news. And it's another Monday Night Football doubleheader as my Miami Dolphins take on the equally as bad Tennessee Titans tonight in Miami. And the Seattle Seahawks travel to Detroit, where they'll most likely take a beating from the Lions. Tomorrow, Tuesday, October the 1st, is the one and only vice presidential debate, don't forget, between Senator Vance and Governor Walz. And like the first 2 presidential debates, there will again be no studio audience. We will talk more about that tomorrow, but you certainly will hear a lot of talk about it today on Newsmax and everywhere else. Keep up with all of the news on Newsmax, Newsmax.com, and make sure you're streaming on Newsmax Plus for the most complete lineup of all of your favorite shows and guests, NewsmaxPlus.com. Get signed up. Rob Schmidt tonight. Greg Kelly reports. The Record with Greta Van Susteren, Carl Higbee, Bianca De La Garza, Ed Henry, Wake Up America, and much, much more with analysis from Governor Mike Huckabee, Mark Halperin, Hogan Gidley, Judge Napolitano, and many, many others. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Enjoy the rest of your day, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Hey, it's Jerry Callahan from The Callahan Show. You can listen to us every day. We react to the latest news, politics, sports, and all the madness in the world. I'll give you my opinion with a little edge, a little attitude. I'm an unapologetic right-winger, trapped behind enemy lines in deep blue Boston, so I'm used to taking on the mainstream media mob. You can hear us anywhere you get your podcast, or you can listen every day at newsmax.com/listen.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real.